Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Sometimes, when things were going well, I think my father actually enjoyed having a family, or at least the air of authenticity we lent to his exhibit, a sort of still life with children. And of course, my brothers and I were free labor. Dad considered us extensions of his own body, like precision robot arms. In this regard, it was like being raised not by Jimmy, but by Martha Stewart. In theory, his arrangement with my mother was more cooperative. In practice, it was not. We each resisted in our own ways, but in the end, we were equally powerless before my father's curatorial onslaught. My brothers and I couldn't compete with the astral lamps and girandoles and Hepplewhite sweet chairs. They were perfect. I grew to resent the way my father treated his furniture like children and his children like furniture. My own decided preference for the unadorned and purely functional emerged early. I was Spartan to my father's Athenian, modern to his Victorian, butch to his Nellie, utilitarian to his aesthete. I developed a contempt for useless ornament. What function was served by the scrolls, tassels, and bric-a-brac that infested our house? If anything, they obscured function. They were embellishments in the worst sense. They were lies. My father began to seem morally suspect to me long before I knew that he actually had a dark secret. He used his skillful artifice not to make things, but to make things appear to be what they were not. He appeared to be an ideal husband and father, for example. But would an ideal husband and father have sex with teenage boys? It's tempting to suggest, in retrospect, that our family was a sham, that our house was not a real home at all, but the simulacrum of one, a museum. Yet, we really were a family, and we really did live in those period rooms. Still, something was missing. An elasticity, a margin for error. Most people, I imagine, learn to accept that they're not perfect. But an idle remark about father's tie over breakfast could send him into a tailspin. My mother established a rule. If we couldn't criticize my father, showing him affection was an even dicier venture. We were not a physically expressive family, to say the least, but once I was unaccountably moved to kiss my father good night. Having little practice with the gesture, all I managed was to grab his hand and bust the knuckles lightly, as if he were a bishop or an elegant lady, before rushing from the room in embarrassment. This embarrassment on my part was a tiny scale model of my father's more fully developed self-loathing. His shame inhabited our house as pervasively and invisibly as the aromatic musk of an aging mahogany. In fact, the meticulous period interiors were expressly designed to conceal it. Mirrors, distracting bronzes, multiple doorways. Visitors often got lost upstairs. My mother, my brothers, and I knew our way around well enough, but it was impossible to tell if the Minotaur lay beyond the next corner. and the constant tension was heightened by the fact that some encounters could be quite pleasant. His bursts of kindness were as incandescent as his tantrums were dark. Although I'm good at enumerating my father's flaws, it's hard for me to sustain much anger at him. I expect this is partly because he's dead, and partly because the bar is lower for fathers than for mothers. My mother must have bathed me hundreds of times, but it's my father rinsing me off with the purple metal cup that I remember most clearly. The suffusion of warmth as the hot water sluiced over me, the sudden unbearable cold of its absence. Was he a good father? I want to say at least he stuck around, but of course he didn't. It's true that he didn't kill himself until I was nearly 20, but his absence resonated retrospectively, echoing back through all the time I knew him. Maybe it was the converse of the way amputees feel pain in a missing limb. He really was there all those years, a flesh and blood presence, steaming off the wallpaper, digging up the dogwoods, polishing the finials, smelling of sawdust and sweat and designer cologne. But I ached as if he were already gone.